Starting off with major news, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett now returning from his meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, the first official trip by an Israeli Prime Minister to Egypt in a decade. And the pair describing the sit-down as overwhelmingly positive.
סיימתי עכשיו ביקור ראשון אצל נשיא מצרים. הפגישה הייתה חשובה מאוד וטובה מאוד. במהלך הפגישה בראש ובראשונה יצרנו תשתית וקשר עמוק להמשך הדרך. אנחנו דנו בשורה של סוגיות בתחום המדיני, בתחום הביטחוני, בתחום הכלכלי, ובדרכים להעמיק את הקשר ולחזק את האינטרסים של המדינות שלנו.
The expanding partnerships then also including the full reopening of the Taba border crossing between Israel and the Sinai to tourists and the introduction of several weekly Egypt Air flights between Cairo and Tel Aviv starting October. But joining me now with more is expert on Arab world geopolitics with NYU and the Moshe Dayan Center, Dr. Joshua Krasna. Dr. Krasna, thanks so much for being with us. Now, first off, the last official visit by an Israeli prime minister to Egypt was when Prime Minister Netanyahu met with former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak in January 2011, just before the uprising that toppled him. Why did it take so long for another meeting?
So first of all, there have been meetings between Israeli prime ministers and Egyptian presidents, between Sisi and Netanyahu since then, in the United Nations General Assembly in 2017, 2018, and reportedly there may have been unofficial visits, or at least unannounced visits, or unannounced meetings that the two have had since then. One of the things that we have to remember is that for quite a while, and certainly between 2011 and 2013, of course, there was tremendous amount of disarray and a short-lived Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. Since 2013, when Sisi came in, Egypt has been very busy. The Egyptian president, the Egyptian regime is very busy sort of putting their domestic house and international house in order. And I think that they didn't want to have the noise of a visit. The relationship has been quite good. In fact, it's been almost good in an almost unparalleled way since 2013. But I think the profile of the relations, it was important for the Egyptians to keep it fairly low. But in recent weeks and months, the Egyptians have been making a more concerted push in the region to increase their diplomatic profile. They're working a lot with with Iraq. They're working a lot with Jordan. And Egypt is taking a much more active role in the past year or two in regional issues. And I think that they see the new Israeli government in this context as being a good opportunity to bring the optics of the relationship in line with the actual content of the relationship, which, as I said, have been extremely good in recent years.
Okay, well, speaking of renewing or increasing ties, possibly even on the backs of Egypt, Bennett is saying that Israel is opening to other countries in the region with the Egypt-Israel peace as the bedrock for expanding regional partnerships. How often does Egypt actually help broker ties between Israel and other Arab states, or how often have they been involved in such brokerages? And what's Egypt's overall influence over other Arab states' decisions?
So that's two different questions, right? I don't think Egypt has been very involved. Egypt has been, of course, all along very involved in our process with the Palestinians. I'm not sure. There may well be an Egyptian aspect in the relationship, in the let's say the willingness of the military part of the new Sudanese regime to pursue a relationship with Israel. On the other hand, other than that, we haven't really seen any major activity by Egypt to promote other countries normalizing with Israel. The second part of your question, Egypt has a significant amount of influence among Arab countries, especially among the smaller Arab countries, especially among the countries nearby to it. But I don't think that I don't visualize Egypt being let's say a matchmaker in any kind of formal way in the foreseeable future. It's just not something that I think that they're interested in doing.
Okay, now I want to ask actually about how Egypt-Israel peace might actually be improved, because if we compare, the opening of the Taba crossing and direct flights to Cairo to just 1 year of peace with the UAE, the difference is tremendous. Why do you think that it has taken so long just to get to a remotely close level of relations with Egypt as opposed to other nations?
So on the first hand, I'll correct, right? We don't have a remotely close relationship with Egypt. We have a very close relationship with Egypt, but it's below the surface. Our security relationship with Egypt, our security alliance with Egypt is really a very significant part of both countries' national security.
But that's at a government level as well. But that's also at a very high level.
That's at a government level. Yes. So I would say that there are three things, and I'll do it quick. The first is Egypt is the largest. Is the most populous Arab state, and sees itself, its image is that it is also the most significant state in the Arab world. Remember also that Egypt fought 4 wars against Israel. In terms of UAE and Bahrain, they were perhaps philosophically opposed to Israel, but they didn't have this sort of deep down enmity that develops when two countries have fought wars for a long time. So that's one thing. So Egypt is a very large country with which is always very the leadership is always very careful, certainly since 2011, to listen to what's going on at the grassroots level. At the grassroots level, there isn't a whole lot of enthusiasm for the peace treaty with Israel. In fact, in general, right, in the Arab world, the leaderships are out ahead of the peoples. So the UAE is a very modernized country. The UAE is a very westernized country. The UAE is a country that is physically far from Israel and has not had a particularly fraught history with Israel. On the other hand, Egypt is a country that's fought wars with Israel. It's a big country with a lot of different security challenges and a lot of different problematical trends within the country, and which is our next door neighbor, right? So your relations with your close neighbors are always going to be a little bit more complicated than your relationship with your more distant neighbors.
All right, Dr. Joshua Krasna, thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.